challenges for our international NGO members in reporting of their data to IATI or to FTS, right? As we know, many of you have seen from the reports of development and initiatives, and most recently, the ALNAP on the global humanitarian funding, is that we still have a lot of millions of funding. We don't actually know where it goes to and whether it's being used by local and national actors or how. So there's still a real gap in understanding funding patterns, delivery chains within the humanitarian sector. And for our membership, we wanted to understand what were the challenges for them in reporting on their downstream, especially on their downstream financing. The other question we wanted to explore is what could be the advantages, the incentives, the challenges with reporting by local and national actors on their international financing, right? We know, as many of us know, of course, that a lot of local and national actors have to report heavily to their governments, what funding they receive internationally, what they're doing with it, et cetera. So could this reporting that's done to governments, could that also be done through the sort of international systems? And that way we also get a better vision from the local and national actors themselves of the funding they are getting from, either INGO partners, UN partners, et cetera. The third piece of work we wanted to explore with this work on data transparency was the potential of getting aggregate indicators from pooled funds. Many of you know that there is quite a large ecosystem of pooled funds, including the UN OCHA-led funds, including NGO-led funds, feminist funds, refugee-led organization funds. We currently do not have a general sense about how much money is going into all these pooled fund mechanisms, from whom, and where is that funding going to? So we brought in Mark. Mark is the founder and executive director of Emergentally, he'll have to say it himself. He is an economist and a software developer with 15 years of experience working with governments, donors, and civil society organizations. His focus has long been on how to use data for the best use of scarce resources, how to make the best use of scarce resources using data. He's worked on a diverse range of issues and lived across many countries in Africa, Europe, and Asia. Mark, it's been really a pleasure to have you and a pleasure to work with you. And we look forward to hearing from you more on the report itself. We also have with us Yemesrach Workie. Yemi is currently the executive director of the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IATI. Yemi has been with the UNDP among many agencies for a long time, including most recently she was the deputy res rep in Fiji. So Yemi comes with a long experience, a long operational experience in this field. So, I mean, Yemi, we really look forward to hearing more from you in terms of bridging that sort of operational reality organizations face with data, right? And especially hearing from you in terms of IATI itself, where you're moving towards, right? We also have Peter joining us. He may not have gone online yet because of data issues. I'm not sure he's here yet. But Peter is a long-term colleague of ours. He's a member of ICVA. He's the head of the Nango National NGO Network in Adamawa in Nigeria. Long-time also leader of his own local and national organization, and works very closely with the Nigerian government and has been a member of the HCT. So very much engaged in the humanitarian international coordination system, in addition to the National NGO Network. So hopefully he will be coming and joining us soon, and he'll give us a perspective of local and national organizations in terms of their data reporting. We have done this whole launch event panel light because we really wanted to give space to you as the audience in terms of questions, conversations, etc. So we'll try to keep the panel side short. And we've also instructed the panelists to be as untechy and as unjargony as possible on data. So it really is, it's geared towards operational actors, even though we welcome all our data experts here. But please, we really want this to be a dialogue between data experts and between operational actors to see how together we can move forward. So no question is stupid. And if you don't understand anything of jargon, please let us know. Also, please use the chat functions to introduce yourself. I saw some of you have already done that. And please, of course, during the course of the event, don't hesitate to put questions into the chat. We'll try to monitor those. At the same time, we'll give you time at the end of this to ask open questions. Without further ado, let me welcome all three of you, Mark, Yemi, and Peter. And Mark, over to you to give both a summary of the report itself, again, looking at the international NGO reporting and local national NGO reporting. And you will be giving us also a glimpse, I understand, of the potential dashboard for reporting on pooled funds as well at the end. Mark, I hand the floor over to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Elise. So I think Maria is going to share the slides. It's just loading. Great, thank you. Yes, so as Elise said, my name is Mark Brough, and I'm the Managing Director of Emergentally. We're based in Berlin, and we work with governments in partner countries, development partners, and civil society organizations to use data to improve the way that development is delivered, basically. And so for this piece of work, we've spoken. Sorry, I'll come into this one moment. But yeah, so I think the next slide. Yes, so this piece of work, it was funded by ICVA. We undertook interviews with over 20 INGOs and local and national actors, and our goals were to understand the key challenges to data reporting and some proposed solutions. And this was focused particularly on INGO publication. And secondly, to review the feasibility of wide-scale reporting by local and national actors. So just to take a little step back then, first of all, to explain what we're talking about in the next slide. So we focus particularly on IATI because it's a mechanism for sharing information by a wide range of different actors for a wide range of different purposes. And the idea is that, on the left-hand side, organizations will gather their data internally. This could be INGOs, national NGOs, it could be governments, donors, philanthropic organizations. They all gather their data internally in their own kind of processes. They publish then their data in this standard format, which makes the data comparable across all kinds of different organizations. And that data then can be used by a whole range of different tools, and because the data is available in the same format. And we're going to come on to in a moment exactly, this idea of publish once, use often, what we mean by that. But hopefully you already from this image start to get, well, this diagram, you already start to get an idea of what we're talking about. Now, the idea is that instead of, do you have this one kind of standard format for publishing information? That means you can use it for all kinds of different purposes. And on the third step, you see below the line, you have the Country Development Finance Data Tool and D-Portal. These are a couple of centrally provided tools by the IATI Secretariat. Then above the line, you also have a range of different applications which are provided by different organizations and can use IATI data to pull data into their own systems. And this includes OCHA's Financial Tracking Service, the Government of Liberia's Project Dashboards, AFDB's, the African Development Bank's Map Africa, and the World Bank hosted Global Alliance for Food Security. These are all different organizations that then can take data in this kind of standard IATI format. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you have then users who can consume, who can access the data that's available through these different platforms, according to the different needs that those users may have then in different contexts. So just to give kind of like an overview of the sort of problem statements and why this work was important. This is from the Global Humanitarian Assistance Report, which was recently published by ALNEP. This report was previously published by Development Initiatives that many of those people on the call will have been familiar with. The report is basically on the state of global humanitarian assistance, and it includes a lot of data in terms of understanding how what we know about kind of humanitarian assistance in 2025 and using 2024 data generally. And the main sort of headline from this visual is that it's not known how the vast majority of funding received by first level recipients is delivered. So if you look on the right hand side, this kind of big gray box, it's about 89% of the total flows that are coming in from the left hand side end up in this gray box on the right hand side, which is, we don't know where the funding then went on to after the first level recipients. And so the idea is that if more of this information were published in a way that, you could unpack that 89%, you could then see where the funding flows onto as well. And of course, this is important for sort of thinking about tracking grand bargain localization commitments and for transparency more broadly, but it's also important for a range of other, more substantial policy or more specific, perhaps, kind of policy purposes as well, which we'll see on the next slide. So INGO data in particular, and I think that these are some of the findings that came out of the interviews. Of course, there were other reasons why this data is important as well, but these are some of the three kind of main reasons that came out of the findings as well. So why INGO data is important to have? Firstly, a really clear finding that we had from the research was that there was a real demand from local and national actors that it's important to have access to INGO data because local and national actors can more easily engage in INGO-funded activities given their scale. And, therefore, the data of INGOs is more important to local and national actors than perhaps larger organizations as well. Of course, the data from larger organizations, from donors and from multilaterals is important for other reasons, but in terms of local and national actors being able to engage in development humanitarian processes and delivery chains, INGO data is really important for local and national actors. Secondly, in terms of service delivery, so INGOs are often responsible for a significant amount of service delivery in particular countries, and coordination between organizations and between different INGOs and between INGOs and other sorts of actors is therefore essential. Because you want to make sure that you're, especially in a world of scarce resources, you want to make sure that you're filling in gaps and not duplicating. And thirdly, in terms of advocacy, so there's this sort of a distinction we made a little bit between service delivery type activities and more sort of advocacy type activities. And in those cases, INGOs may be engaging in sensitive sectors, and in those cases, there may be need for a careful approach. But these are three reasons why we think INGO data is important in terms of what came out of the research. Okay, so now to the core findings of the research. So the first finding is that many INGOs struggle with publishing data, and few see its value beyond compliance. So at the moment, we have a situation with publishing to IATI that there are a number of different development partners that have long mandated recipients of funding from them to start publishing to IATI. But most of the INGOs that we spoke to did not report that they had received kind of much more substantial feedback on their data. And we're going to come on to in a moment some examples of how the data can be used and is already being used as well to demonstrate that there are some of these use cases already. But in terms of INGO data, I think that there's a lot more potential, sort of unrealized potential at the moment still. And so because the focus is on compliance mostly, it means that lots of INGOs are focusing on only publishing, those particular activities that they're required to do so. And that leads to some particular sort of consequences in terms of the sort of data that's published and the way it's published as well. Which brings us on to the second point, that data publication is very manual for most INGOs, and that prevents scalability and efficiency. But there are some good examples of automation. So this point basically leads from the compliance point, right? So if you're only required to publish, this small subset of activities that you have contractual obligations to do so, and you focus on only doing those, then you're not going to institute kind of processes that allow for automation, allow you to scale, to publish, substantially your complete set of activities, right? And so there's a challenge really that's created by the fact that lots of INGOs are publishing in a very manual way. So typing information into online forms, for example, or emailing data over to third-party vendors for them to then go and publish on their behalf. But as I said, there are some good examples of automation, and we heard this clearly through the research. I'm going to come on to that in the recommendations in a moment to share some ways in terms of how organizations can make this shift from manual to automated. Thirdly, and I sort of mentioned this briefly just now, local and national actors urgently need and want access to INGO data to participate in development processes and to hold partners accountable. And this was a very strong finding that we had from all of the local and national actors, or most of the local and national actors that we spoke to, that there was a real call for having access to the information, both in terms of being able to engage in processes with INGOs to be able to take part in delivery chains, but also in terms of advocacy and accountability efforts. So working at the country level and trying to ensure that resources are going to those places with greatest need. And finally, governments need better data to coordinate humanitarian and development efforts, yet data sharing is inconsistent. And so in most countries, the government is the largest kind of single actor for, I mean, I guess in all countries, in fact, in terms of being able to deliver development and humanitarian activities. And so it's really important to make sure that activities are delivered in sync with, you know, all parts of the resources available. And you kind of get that, I think, on the next slide. This is the piece of work that I've just dug out from the archives from a long time ago. And this was the first piece of work that I did when I started working in this area about 15 years ago. And it was to try and pull together a data set of government spending and aid donors and be able to see, this was in Uganda 2006-07. The actual visualization was done a bit later, but the data set dates from then. And the idea was that you want to be able to see not only what donors are doing or what government is doing, but you need to see the two things together. And I think that's a really important way of seeing this in terms of the INGO contributions, the development partner contributions, the multilaterals, the governments. You want to be able to see all of these things together in a coherent picture if you were to be able to make a sort of sensible strategic allocation of resources. And of course, there are different ways in which you would look at this. In terms of, you know, at the country level, you can think about this also in terms of, you know, the distribution geographically as well, not just in a sector type way, or the way in which you're kind of reutilizing existing delivery chains when you want to respond quickly to in a crisis response as well. It's important to be able to see everything all together. Okay, so in the next slide, this is sort of the traditional approach to data sharing, right? So the idea is, and you can see there's lots of squiggles all over the place and there's lots of boxes. And so it's not important to read all of the boxes or to understand all the squiggles, but the basic picture of this is complexity, right? And it's very complex and it's very brittle as well, right? So you have on the left-hand side, it says donor. This is an IATI slide from a long time ago, but I dug it out again because I think sometimes, you know, sometimes the old ideas are the good ideas, right? And on the left-hand side, you have different sorts of organizations, so donors, and they're sharing information with different applications in the middle. So different requests, you know, sort of ad hoc specific requests, country level aims, OECD reporting, sector level, sector coordination groups, different country aggregators for donor specific dashboards. And then on the right hand side, you have all kinds of different users who are then getting the data in parts from different systems as well. And this is a very complex picture, right? And it's very brittle because each time, you know, donors or any other organization needs to make sure that each of these different links is working, right? Each of these specific output formats for each of these specific applications is working on an ongoing basis, right? So it's very complex, it's very burdensome, it's very inefficient, and it's also brittle, you know, so because there are lots of these links that can break, and then some things will fall out of different systems, right? So the idea through IATI is, and if we go to the next slide, is instead of this, you have this much simpler, cleaner picture, right? So you publish once and use often. And on the left-hand side, it says donor-specific format, but again, this can be any kind of other organization. So you publish the data, a complete set of data once in a standard format, and that information, that data can then be cut many different ways for the different applications that need to use the data. And so, yes, you see the donor publishes data out, and there's this additional line to say, you could go around the IATI format for OECD, but you could also go through it as well. But then from the IATI standard format, you then have all the different application formats on the right-hand side. And so the IATI format is the kind of translation mechanism that allows you to get the data out in one format and then apply it to a whole range of different applications. And this is much simpler to see and understand, I think. I think hopefully causes much less anxiety than the previous slide as well, which is an important thing in these times. And I think it's a much more robust, I think, mechanism for sharing data rather than having all these different lines and all these different specific outputs. So the challenge is to move from the previous slide to that slide, basically. And just one final point on this, one of the challenges that we have is that at the moment, we still have IATI as a bit of a one additional line coming out of some of those systems, instead of replacing some of the existing reporting requirements as well. And so I think there's a need for some more effort and some more concerted effort to make sure that, the publish once, use often approach actually leads to a reduction in the number of different kind of reporting requirements by satisfying a wider range of reporting requirements more easily as well. But I think the principle is quite clear and makes a lot of sense, right? So yes, so before I come on to some of the recommendations, I just wanted to give a couple of good examples of use of IATI data so far, to demonstrate that we're not really just talking in the sort of abstract or about theory, and that we're really talking about a standard that is already being used in a range of different ways. And probably, I think it's fair to say, much more so in the development space than in the humanitarian space. But every time I'm talking to people and to new kind of stakeholders about using IATI data, I really emphasize the fact that at this point we have a bit of a gold mine of data, I think, that's ready to be used, and that there's a lot here that people can start taking advantage of. So a few examples: the Library Project dashboard, it now uses data from 8 of the largest development partners to track and to coordinate what different partners are doing across the country in Liberia. And this has the potential to gradually expand to kind of include more development partners' data. So this is an example of us taking one of those kind of individual lines, one of these individual reporting requirements, and replacing it with saying, okay, if we can get the data through IATI, then we can replace lots of kind of manual data entry, which saves a lot of people time, but it also significantly improves the quality of data in the system as well. And if you click again, yeah, so one example of how this has been used. So the system itself is public and open to anyone who wants to access it. And the data in that system is being used by a range of different actors, development partners to coordinate amongst themselves, by academics, and by journalists as well. And in this case, this is an article using that data, which originally came from IATI, to look at the impact of the USAID cuts on NGOs as well. And so I think it's really important. I like this example because I think it emphasizes how publishing to IATI and getting data through to governments and getting data onto civil society and journalists, these are not really competing objectives. They flow through one to the other, I think. If you click again, please. This is another example of a story that was done for CNN, and it was on Christian Amanpour, which used IATI data to understand funding flowing through to anti-rights groups, and to focus on understanding whether this is something that donors were aware of, that some of the money originating from them through some intermediaries ended up with anti-rights groups in Ghana. And the last one is the Global Alliance for Food Security. This is the World Bank Postal Initiative, and this uses IATI data also to understand where there are interventions that are related to food security. And the map at the moment, it's actually, what I've selected there is showing spending in 2025. So we're talking about very, very current data. Okay, next slide. So what about FTF, I guess, is one of these questions, right? So I think, and I think what we spoke about and what we found in some of the research, and I haven't gone into some of the more detailed analysis in this presentation, but this is all in the report as well. There are challenges with the quality of reporting of data to IATI by NGOs and also to FTS by NGOs. And so at the moment, this kind of dual parallel approach of organizations having to report separately to each system, we can see that that's not leading to good quality data. And I just wanted to kind of give this example of the pilot that's been, or the work that's currently being undertaken with IATI and the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to automate Denmark's FTS publication from their IATI data. And I think this is very exciting because, FTS being one of the key kind of principal, customers for a lot of this data, at the moment, instead of information having to be manually entered through web-based forms or emailed across to the FTS team, if the information that's coming out of development partner systems and from INGO systems into the IATI format can then be, just repurposed and converted into the format that's needed for FTS, I think this can lead to like a really positive opportunity to reduce the burden of parallel reporting processes. And this is a screenshot where you can see this is the output format that's required for FTS from the Danish data as well. So this is kind of showing that it's possible and that it's almost working as well. Okay, so then the key recommendations. So firstly, there's the need to improve INGO data quality. And what does this mean? So there needs to be a broader coverage of activities and more automation. And in the report, there were some specific recommendations about how to achieve this. This includes, for example, speaking to software suppliers. There are a number of software suppliers now who provide projects and/or financial management systems for INGOs, which include IATI publication as standard in that software. And so I think there's a real opportunity for INGOs, especially when you're coming to any decision-making points where you maybe want to kind of replace or upgrade an existing system, to look for a system which does already provide this as standard. This is something that there were a number of examples that came out of the findings that said that these systems are available now which can do that. And I think there's an opportunity to kind of start moving in that direction. But I think it's also important to kind of start creating market signals in that direction as well, so that more software suppliers will start to ensure that their products are going to be able to deliver this in future as well. And what that would mean is that if the software is able to automatically publish data to IATI, instead of NGOs having to go through very time-consuming processes, manually keying data into web-based forms or sending data to third-party suppliers, the systems can pump the data out automatically as well. Secondly, to scale the IATI and FTS pilot. So to look at taking this work with Denmark, and I know that there are some other donors have also been engaged with this pilot, to allow a wider range of organizations, including INGOs and others, to report their data to FTS through that approach. Thirdly, to reward publications. So to shift from a compliance focus, which is based on, just publishing data for these specific contracts, to instead create wider incentives. And this could include, for example, and of course, this would depend on each development partner's own procurement processes, but for example, including, some additional points in procurement processes or grants decisions if organizations have already begun to publish, substantially everything to IATI. While, of course, recognizing that there will be particular activities that can't be published for security or sensitivity reasons. The next point is about supporting local and national actors in data publication. So, and I think that work has already begun to be done in this area over the last 6 months to improve the accessibility and the language of IATI tools and focus IATI Publisher, the IATI publication tool, specifically on the needs of local and national actors. There's a need to make data more useful. And so this includes supporting country level capacity building. So making sure that actors at the country level are able to use the data, perhaps through things like trainer of trainer sort of activities. It was really interesting that whenever we spoke to local and national actors, in most cases, there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about this data and an interest to learn much more about it. But and in some ways kind of a surprise to find out that a lot of this data already existed as well. And not only to have sort of general capacity building exercises, but also to develop specific tools to improve effectiveness and accountability. And that could mean thinking about the sort of tools that would be useful also at the senior leadership level of INGOs to understand when senior decision makers are starting to think about allocation decisions, that they can see what other organizations are currently putting their own resources and then be able to respond accordingly. And finally, there's a need to sustain engagement and build community. So IATI has long had a very wide, a very big and quite engaged community around it. But I think there's a need to reinvigorate some of that community and also to engage further with national NGO bodies, with the recognition that, you know, for a small secretariat, it's not going to be possible to engage one-on-one with, you know, potentially hundreds or thousands of NGOs, but through local and through national NGO bodies, that could provide maybe a conduit to engaging with some of them. Okay, final slide is this. So as Elise mentioned at the start, we did have a second chunk of work that we were working on for ICVA as part of this contract. And the idea was to gather data from the ecosystem of pooled funds. So we pulled data together that was published to IATI from a subset of the total available pooled funds, I think 4 of the biggest ones. And we wanted to use this to see if we could track how much funding was basically getting through to local and national actors. This is just to give a sort of preview of a set of work that we are continuing to work on and will need to refine a little bit. There will be some challenges in terms of the specific coding used by organizations when they publish their data. And there's a need to go back to those organizations and to ask them, hey, look, this is what your data says. Does this make sense to you? You know, is this a sensible reflection of what you think you're doing, you know, in terms of the share of the pooled funds resources which are going to different sorts of actors, for example. But yes, just to give a sneak peek of some of that work that's coming up as well. I think that's it for me. I know that was a bit of a whirlwind of information, but it was a pretty thorough set of interviews, and I wanted to make sure that this interview hopefully reflected back to some of you, especially if we have some of those interviewees on the call, some of the things that you told us as well. Okay, thank you very much.
Mark, really thank you for that. And thank you for summarizing in a very concise, clear way the key findings of this piece of work. And there's a lot of your points, I think, now that we want to explore a bit more deeply, both with Peter, who I introduced earlier as both the head of the NANGO net, so the network in Adamawa of national NGOs, as well as leading his own local and national NGO, very closely having worked with the government in many to advance the cause of national NGOs and humanitarianism in Nigeria, and also a member of the HCT, among many other functions, and also an ICVA member and a long-time colleague of mine. Peter, if I can start with you quickly, you heard what Mark has been saying. As both the head of a national NGO network and speaking on behalf of your network and also speaking on behalf of your members of local and national actors in Nigeria, what do you see to be the major benefit or the major incentive for both local and national networks and organizations to report to an IATI-like system your international funding from international partners? Okay, maybe what I'll do, Peter, I'll let you try to sort that out. Let me maybe jump to Yemi then. And Peter, I'll come back to you after. Okay, so Yemi, you've like heard the findings of Mark, and you've seen, in fact, for both for the sort of international NGOs and the local and national NGOs, there's a challenge both in terms of the incentives to be reporting to IATI. Yes, Peter, your hand is raised. Is it working? Are you unmuted? No. Okay. So you saw that there's a sort of incentive challenge, but there's also a sort of manual challenge that it's quite heavy, right? And especially we've heard a lot that for international NGOs that are families, that have family offices or networks, for them it's even more complex. And that a lot of them are still doing this manually. So if you could tell us a bit, Yemi, in terms of IATI itself, what are you doing to make it easier for local and national actors to report into IATI, and eventually what you're doing to help the sort of international NGOs as well? Over.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there, it works.
It works. Perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's an absolute honor and delight for me to be here today and meet your esteemed audience in this webinar. I wanted to thank Mark for the great work done. We couldn't have been more delighted for us to see such a report. And I wanted to thank you for spearheading such a report, because it's absolutely informative and it is very timely as well. So Mark has done a great job in presenting much of the information related to IATI, but just to get us into the same place, because he's already done so much, I won't say much. But the International Aid Transparency Initiative, since it has been established, we have over 1,700 publishers, out of which 269 organizations and national NGOs, and 676 are also international NGOs. So really the NGO community plays a major role in IATI publishing and using IATI data. That's what I wanted to say. And he has said so much about the IATI standard, and I wanted to just say that we've been adapting it, evolving it, to making it much more robust, responsive to the needs of humanitarian as well as development community, to the extent that today we have a gold mine, as Mark rightly pointed out. And what was also very clear from this presentation is that really the vision of IATI was from the get-go, publish once and use many times. And at the same time, we also have been learning a whole lot along the way, that the needs are evolving continuously. And to the extent that the need was changing, we've been adapting IATI standard to fit the needs of its multi-stakeholder groups. And the challenge, which you really actually pointed out, actually come and arises as a result of such. Of course, the capacities of multiple actors involved in the data value chain varies across the board. We cannot measure the capacity of multilateral organizations like the World Bank, IMF, or IFC and UNDP against a local NGO or national actor or international NGOs. Therefore, as we move along, not only that our data standards need to adapt to the needs of these various groups, but also it should be able to give capacity. We must start working in building capacity. So when we hear all these presentation, what strikes me most for me is that, of course, IATI need to evolve, and we are evolving at this moment, and we are very keen to adapt our standard as we've been doing it in the past to fit the needs of the community. And we wanted the data to be usable. The fact that the data is usable is what actually improves the incentive for publishing or engaging in IATI data publication, to the extent that our tools are also very intuitive. Publishers, including the ones who has very limited capacity, are able to publish and use IATI data. So what we are doing, Elise, is trying to really adapt our tools, such as the IATI publisher for the smaller publishers with a limited activity, to become more intuitive to them, very easy to use, and be able to use it. Most importantly, we're also dedicating our service line for publishers and users to have 5 days in a week to have a help desk, which always responds to their needs in terms of really guiding them. So we are developing more guidelines, more help services, more importantly, making our tools to become more intuitive. But at the same time, I wanted to say that we have also designed what we call an IATI Academy, which guides people. It's a course which guides people to be able to publish in IATI or using IATI data. This is not it for all. For us, I think we see a much more increased role for IATI. We wanted to sit and broker as many dialogues as possible between various data providers and data demanders to be able to really synchronize, harmonize the needs, so that IATI standard continues to adapt to that and reduce the publication burden for our stakeholder groups. We also look into much more deeper engagement at a country level. So expect IATI in the years to come to engage more deeply at a country level in the manner that Mark has also been explaining it, so that we get a much more closer pulse into the needs and the capacity building needs of our community. So these are the things that we are doing. And with AI coming into the space, I just wanted to also let you know that IATI is also adapting in various ways, incorporating IATI into its tooling system and insight generations. And what we really hope to see is that IATI tools not only will be available in 1 or 2 languages, but in multiple languages as we move along, so that we make it much more possible for local regional actors to be able to use IATI tools in publishing or using IATI data. So these are certain things that we are taking into consideration in our 5-year planning processes now, and some of them have already started on, and others are coming along. So this is a few things that I can mention, if I may. Thank you.
Yemi, really thank you for that. Super, super useful and very interesting. Are you able, if whatever you're able to put into the chat as links to this IATI Academy and to the tool books and et cetera for the people who are on this launch, that would be super, super useful on your part. Let me just, before Peter, let's just test if you can speak. Can you try? Take off the mute. Is it working, Peter?
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Welcome, Peter. Okay, so let me then, Yemi, I will come back to you afterwards to understand more the IATI FTS link, because I think for complete neophytes like me, one thing I learned is it's not either or IATI or FTS. It's not a competition, but it's IATI as the input and FTS is one of the big major outputs, if I understand correctly. So really interesting to hear more from you on that and the pilot you've done with Denmark, which Mark quickly mentioned. But before going into that, Peter, can I turn to you? You just heard from Yemi what they're doing to try to make IATI much more user-friendly for local and national actors, right? Going back, Peter, to the incentive structure for local and national actors and you as a network, you know, what would drive you, or why would it be useful for you to be reporting into IATI? And what are the risks for you in sort of doing so, right? And if I can ask a third question on top of that, just to save time, is you already have to report a lot to the government, right? How much of that reporting on what you do and your financing that you give to the government can actually be shareable as is to IATI without doing too much more? And maybe, Yemi, this is a question back to you again. Are you helping them to make the links between what they have to do to the government versus the international? So it's, again, published once, including to national governments, right, under the sort of NGO laws. So Peter, over to you. Why do this for local and national NGOs? What are the risks, and how much of it can you already use in terms of what you do for governments? Over.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And let me start by thanking IATI, ICVA, and other partners for making this survey a reality. And I think it will go a long way when being shared with other partners globally, whether in Africa, Asia, anywhere they exist. It's going to help a lot of people, a lot of actors and partners to understand the importance of data and its application to the kind of work that we do. And coming specifically to the relevance of data in our own climate where we operate, data is everything. We all need data to operate, either for planning, execution of our projects, reporting, and accountability. It also enables a lot of transparency. Once you have data, it becomes evidence-based. You can actually know where you are making progress and where you are having a challenge, and it also enables you to address those challenges. However, in our own climate, specifically, I want to speak in the northeastern part of Nigeria that has been riddled with the incidents of Boko Haram for over 10 years and still counting, that the national actors, local NGO where I operate, it's still struggling with data. One, in terms of how to even to collate information, it's a challenge. How to analyze, this is a very important one. How to analyze data in itself is also a daunting challenge within the sector where I operate. So we rely more on the international NGOs, UN system, and other intermediaries to do our work most times, because most times our data even, it's not being appreciated by the government, even by the host government, until they see data from the likes of IMF, UN system, World Bank, and the rest. That is when you start seeing our government taking such data as reasonable. But when it comes for us, from us who operate within the local communities, most times they don't take it serious. But talking about the risk that is involved in our operations where we operate, sometimes it's very risky. It can be very risky. Once you share data, the government might blackmail you and say you are being political. You are becoming an opposition. You are becoming an activist. But whereas you are only exercising your fundamental rights as enshrined in the Constitution and United Nations Charter as a citizen to air your voice and to hold government accountable. So most times there's this conflicting action by governments brandishing us or labeling us as anti-government. And sometimes they climb down on INGOs. In fact, in Nigeria, one of the INGOs that is leading in data collection and supporting INSO, for instance, has been shut down in Nigeria just a few weeks ago, not more than 3 weeks ago. INSO is no more operating in Nigeria currently. They have a problem with the federal government of Nigeria because of the information that they shared. And it's so classified that we don't even know what kind of information that they shared that made INSO to be shut down. Acted also was shut down in Nigeria last year. So, and all these things has to do with data, the confidentiality around it. And so for us who operate in the field, yes, we are citizens, but again, there's a risk sometimes of you being shut down, you being arrested, and you being locked up. However, despite this risk, we cannot take away the importance of data itself, because without data, it means we are not going anywhere. So whether we like it or not, it's something we have to deal with. And in dealing with it, we need to have the right kind of expertise, the knowledge, and the sensitivity around it to work so that we don't get ourselves sometimes boxed in a corner. Now, and I like the recommendations that Mr. Baudot brought, especially bullet point 4, 5, and 6. It speaks directly to my own constituency. I'm not saying the other ones are not good, but again, if you look at the status and the power equation between the UN system, the INGOs, the FCDOs, and the local NGOs. Unfortunately, the local NGOs are more in number, and they are the ones implementing in the communities where they find them, hard to reach locations. But I can tell you, the power equation does not lie with the local NGOs. And that is why whatever thing IATI, ICVA, the other agencies who are supporting this process, whatever thing we're able to do to get the national actors wherever they operate across the globe to be part of this process will be very, very good. And I speak as somebody who has been in this system for a very long time, working in one of the most remote locations on earth. Sometimes it can be so difficult where we operate from. You can see some of the difficulties I'm even having now. I'm in the heart of Abuja, the capital city of Nigeria, but yes, we are dealing with challenge of internet. So we need capacity strengthening of our members, especially the national actors. And I keep saying this every day. It's becoming like a soundbite now. Most forums that I speak to, where I keep talking about that we cannot even achieve the localization agenda if the national actors are not seen as partners in progress, sitting on the same table and making information to the donors, FCDOs, and wherever they exist. So the survey is a good one. I also want to speak on a concrete example I want to give, for instance, like ICVA was doing a survey on the localization implementation across 9 countries in Africa, both in West and Central Africa. And Nigeria happens to be one. And my organization, my forum, actually led on that survey in Nigeria. It is called Localization Barometer Survey. Now, one of the challenges we have, we're trying to get a data analyst to fit into that survey to help us do the work. And we advertised the position for 3 weeks. We couldn't get anybody from the national actors, national NGOs. And at the end of the day, somebody from IMAP and WFP applied. And they came from the international NGOs. These are capacity that they have. So the data analyst that we even hired, that was paid, even though we are the ones doing the job, in conjunction with ICVA that is sponsoring us and BHA at that time, it was an international NGO personnel that we hired as a consultant that helped us do that activity to analyze the data. So the expertise is not domiciled within the national actors, even though it affects us. So what I'm trying to say is that we don't even have the resources to hire a data analyst professional, expert to help us do our job. So in projects implementation, most times, national NGOs, you find 3 people doing the same work. But in INGO, for every strand of activity or milestones that must be achieved, you find an officer, a specialist that is being employed to do the job. So it comes with, it's capital intensive to get people with the right kind of expertise and skills to do the job. But the national NGOs don't have this. And this is why kind of advocating that wherever we have this kind of data, we are so happy, because at the end of the day, it helps everybody. The donor who is giving the funds, the government who is the host, you that is doing the job, and the community that you are even supporting. When they see the data the way it is, it speaks even when you are not there. Long after you've gone out of that location, the data is still there to speak in years to come. And finally, from my end, I will say that it's a good thing that this has come on board now, and it's good. We should synergize, talk more with national actors wherever they operate, not just Peter, but any other person who is working in this capacity. I find myself, you discover that we may not have seen ourselves, but our stories are the same. If you speak to somebody in Bangladesh who is working in the national NGO, he will probably say the same thing I'm saying, but maybe in a different way. It's because we experience the same kind of issue year in, year out. And our governments, most times they want to see us reporting every naira, dollar, pounds that is being received from the donor. In fact, we are being labeled most times in Nigeria. And I think, Elise, you know that sometimes the governments will tell you that we get funds from donors and we use it to sponsor the terrorists themselves. We are being branded most times. It comes out on national paper. You can Google it. You'll find it from the parliament in Nigeria most times. So, and their interest is more on the money. And this money, most times, no national NGO can even defraud a donor, because the checks and balances and the kind of funding that is being given to you most times is being monitored from the beginning to the end, and is given to you in tranches. So I think this kind of survey is good for us, and interaction will help a lot of us. And I want to thank you again for really coming out with this concrete recommendation, because it speaks directly to the core issues that affect our operations wherever we operate as humanitarians and development actors. Thank you for the opportunity, and over. Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for the very eloquent and very clear ask. And I think with the concrete examples, I mean, it makes me think too, Peter, the best survey answers I ever got was partnering with Peter, and Peter getting his network, all the local and national actors to engage, right? That's where you get true information and true learning, right? So I think, again, this is an invaluable opportunity to really make sure that this ecosystem of information and knowledge really circulates, right? And is of use to everyone. So Peter, really thank you for that very clear call and very clear ask, and really clear reality check in terms of what locally led decision-making and action means, right? In terms of capacity strengthening, if necessary. So again, really thank you for that. Yemi, let me turn to you just with one last question on the IATI FTS links and the pilot done with Denmark on this. And where do you see this going? So maybe you could explain a little bit, a bit more what that pilot was and how you're going to be expanding and sort of growing that a bit more. And then I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. Over.
Thank you very much. It's an excellent question, and we're very excited about that pilot, let me say. First and foremost, as you know, IATI, and you mentioned it earlier on as well, and I wanted to reiterate the same message, that IATI is a very comprehensive, robust, interoperable data standard, open data standard, and we have a mandate of collecting this information, very useful information, both in development cooperation as well well as humanitarian resources, results, implementing partners, and make it available to all parties or stakeholder groups across the world. And this is what we stand for, and that's what we do every day. And FTS has its own also very specific, let's say, use and utility case in terms of granular information on humanitarian resources. So these two, as you rightly pointed out, are very synergetic, and we see ourselves operating in the same open data ecosystem. So collaboration and cooperation between the two of us is absolutely imperative. It's very important that we work together. To the extent that this is the case, and in the past there was a system called IDRIS system for European countries where they were reporting through that, and the information was really channeled to FTS. And recently, a change has been implemented through the European Commission where that system is being brought to a sunset. As a result of that, many of the partners engaged in this process asked IATI to try and support them in publishing once and using data many times, or even fulfill their reporting obligations. So we found that to be very important request, and we engaged with FTS. We've always been engaged with FTS, but this was a particular use case where we thought we can demonstrate how one can actually publish in IATI, and data can be packaged and put together in FTS format that can be easily submitted to FTS and fulfill their obligations for reporting in FTS as well as in IATI in one go. So we took that challenge thanks to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Denmark, Danida, who actually really offered us the use case opportunity. And we did that since January 2024. And we've been doing that for the last couple of months, generating that information to be submitted for FTS. This has shown us that this possibility does exist. And not only that it exists, it is possible to do it in a meaningful way without a lot of transactional cost to both institutions involved in, and reducing significantly the burden on reporting in multiple platforms to the publishers. So we found that to be quite an exciting opportunity. Having said so, it's still ongoing, and we are doing the learning. We're collecting the learning. We wanted to do it with other group of stakeholders, including NGOs, where such a possibility does exist, who are already reporting to IATI, and how we can work with them to really turn that around for them to FTS format. And in that occasion, we wanted to learn from that experience as well and see how we can scale it up to multiple stakeholder groups. As you all know, each publisher has its own business processes, systems in place, and they are quite varying. What Danida uses is different from what other publisher is going to be using. So we wanted to really get a feel of different type of publishers and have a sense of how they are publishing in IATI, and whether this is also being potentially can be converted into FTS format. So we wanted to try out multiple stakeholder groups in the same kind of pilot so that we can actually scale it out. So if partners are keen to do that, please reach out to us. We'll be very happy to work with you in making this happen. Now, having said that, this is not the only opportunity that we are exploring at the moment. We're actually exploring with, I don't know how many of you knows them, QoSSD. It's also another organization with an open data standard, but really capturing all other flows, not only aid. And there is a huge overlap between IATI and QoSSD, almost over 80% of our standard fields are very much similar. So we're very much keenly exploring this opportunity with them. And in fact, we have a side event organized for the Financing for Development 4 in Spain a week from now, where we actually zooming in into interoperability between these two systems. We see ourselves in an ecosystem. We see ourselves that resources are dwindling across the board for real-time development needs and humanitarian action, and the data ecosystem being fragmented or being difficult to maintain is going to actually add more challenge to the operators than being a solution. So we wanted to take part into the solution side, and we're really exploring potential interoperability with various other open data standards. So what I would like to reassure you is the future of development cooperation and humanitarian action is in collaboration, in cooperation, in streamlining reportings and making data more accessible, more visible, more usable by all, so that at the end of this process, we all benefit significantly. Resources are not getting more, they are actually getting scarce. So it is a strategic imperative for all of us to collaborate and work together. I truly, truly look forward to work with various parties and stakeholder groups involved in the data value chain to make this happen. So this is a future that we're looking forward to. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Yemi. Thank you for that. Yes, I think you were very correct to say that we're in scarce resources. So the importance of interoperability and the importance of making sure that it all works together in a seamless puzzle, if you will, is more and more critical. Let me open the floor now. We also have Ole Holland. I'm sure I killed your name, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, who's also on the call and I think worked closely with you on this pilot. So Ole, if I can hand it over to you first in terms of any thoughts you would have on this going forward in terms of IATI, FTS, and the whole data reporting from the perspective of a donor. If I can put you on the spot quickly for any thoughts you would have. I don't know if your microphone works.
Yes.
Yeah, there.
Yes.
Hi, Ole.
Hello. Hi.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy to listen in on this, and of course, as always, Mark, you keep the objective present for us. Of course, it is and has always been the objective to publish once and use often. I think I will just start saying that it's not that easy. If in your illustration you sort of suggested that it was already the case that IATI data could be transformed into dark data, or IATI data could be transformed into FTS data. But it's not the case, and it's not actually a matter of data quality, it's a matter of data structure. So there's a difference between these international standards in the way data is structured that is quite cumbersome to overcome. When it comes to FTS and our pilot, our first sort of move to prove the concept was to establish an internal solution for us to generate our FTS report in the FTS template based on our own IATI data. We did it as an internal solution because then we could pick the information, additional information required for the FTS reporting, for the aggregation to take place, and respecting the logic of the FTS formats. And it proved possible for us. We did this in March, and we had a complete reporting for the first quarter to FTS, and then subsequently monthly reports. So it is possible, but it is cumbersome because the FTS format has it seems to be a flat format, but really there are embedded hierarchies in the definition of the different columns. So it's not just a matter of data missing. We intend to find a way to include additional data in our IATI file that is possible, technically possible, but it's also the transformation of data. There's quite complicated logic in aggregating data into the semi-aggregated FTS format. However, we do have this ambition together with the tech team to redevelop, or what you say, develop once more the same machine as we have now internally on the IATI platform. And we intend to be very specific on what it will require for other IATI publishers to use this tool to convert the IATI data into FTS format. We are not there yet, but I can already now reveal some of the elements of this recommendation for other IATI publishers. And one of the basic is to, when you publish in the activity file, your individual activities, don't try to invent a new concept of activities like projects or programs or something like that. Stick with what's across the board the relevant level for your administrative task, and that is the individual engagement, the individual tasks, the individual agreements you enter into with your partners, whether funding partners or downstream implementing partners. The individual agreements, make them your activities in the IATI format. Then you have data. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I can turn up the sound at my end. Are there someone who could help me? It seems as if my volume is actually on the top of what I can provide.
Yeah,
of
I think
input.
on our side it's clear, but
Okay.
we've turned up the volume on the computer, but I don't know if it's a general issue or, yeah. Please,
Okay.
Ole, keep going.
Oh yeah, where were I? Yes, the engagement as the activity level in your activity file, that is to me quite crucial to maintain the opportunity to create these multiple layers of flow data. And that's very important to underscore that we does have that in common with FGS. FGS is also a flow-based format. So the flow data in IATI is exactly what they need in FGS. And the interlinkage between funding partners, implementing partner is exactly what they need in FGS. So that's why I've quite actually strong feelings about this. This must succeed because it is absolutely the same data required in both formats. So we must overcome this obstacle of transforming data from one format to the other, expecting then when we can prove this as the way forward, the standards will also align over time. But we cannot request anyone to reinvent their format right now and right here. It must be a gradual alignment over time. Our first step must be to prove that this is the same data called for, just into different formats. And that's what we have taken on as our commitment in this pilot phase, to prove that it is the same data we're talking about.
Ole, thank you so much for that. Very clear. No, and again, if there's anything that if ICVA can do as a network with all our members to help make this happen, to make that there's one place where reporting happens and that it's clear and easy, and then it's translated into FTS, into all the other systems that we need, right, to understand a bit more, as Peter said, data being essential, right, in going forward, especially with less money, scarce resources. Please let us know on this. Can I open the floor? Are there, to anyone who has questions in the audience, just please raise your hand. I haven't seen anything in the chat yet.
Look at the Q&A section.
Oh, I know you have. Oh, is there? Ah, okay, sorry. Yes, there are. It's a Q&A section. Yeah, I think that there's there's a lot of questions in the chat around international NGOs. I mean, international NGOs and what's conceived to be their lack of willingness to share information, right? To share their complete budgets, to share information of what they're working at and where they're in fact working. I don't know if you have some thoughts on that, Peter, in terms of sort of the relationship between international NGOs and local and national NGOs in terms of data sharing, and how potentially you have worked with your international NGO partners in terms of better data sharing or getting them to be sharing more data. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Peter.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, in terms of our relationship with INGO in data sharing, I must say here that it's been cordial to a large extent because they partner with the national actors, most of them. So they share some of this information with us, especially where you are doing a joint programming. You know how it operates here is that the donor brings the money. Most times the INGOs are the ones who get this funds from the donor, whether from EU, BHA, they are no more here, or UN system, or whoever, the FCDO that gets the funds. Some of these donors don't give money directly to the national NGOs because the national NGOs somehow have not been profiled to be risk-free in terms of financial management and putting processes and data in place within their organization. So to reduce risks, most times they give funds to the INGOs or other intermediaries. So at that level, information is being shared with us. in fairness, they do get access to information through the INGOs, but limited information, only to what they want us to know or what we need to see. If you go to the IATI dashboard, for instance, how many of the national NGOs are being captured? Even though they work in the field every day, they implement funding, they get funding, but not as significant like what the INGOs or UN system will have. So they are only able to profile only the big spenders of this world. Name them, the Save the Children, IRCs, NRCs, name them. These are the guys who actually get the funds from the donors and the FCDOs. And most times it is their data and their profile that you see on IATA website or their platform. And you can actually track their spendings from there. Even on the financial tracking system that is being anchored by OCHA most times, it's still same thing. So you don't get to see national actors, national NGOs, activities being projected significantly. And this is because the funding that gets to them is not that much. But again, it's still donor funding that gets to them, even if it's a small percentage. That percentage needs to be highlighted. So there's this gap. I don't think it's deliberate, but I think it's an oversight by both the donor, the intermediaries, and every other actors on that platform. So they do share information with us, but they are limited information, not as frequent and accessible or easily that you want to see, only to the project that you are implementing, except if you dig further. If you are that type of organization that rely on data that much to do your job, then you want to dig further, and at that point you get it. So there are fewer local NGOs that actually data savvy and efficient, and they're able to get information as much as possible as they can get. So we rely more on some of this data, and some of the data we use most times we get from the international NGOs, UN system, and the rest. And again, it is because by default, our system rely more on the government, they rely more on international data, finding some international agencies more than ours. Even when it comes to advocacy, most times, we lobby through the UN system, the embassies within our country. Our government seems to listen to those kind of information coming from these big guys more than us. So if you come to Nigeria most times, it isn't that people are not ready to do it, but again, donors are not even ready to fund national NGOs to even work on issues of data. They prefer spending their money more with the INGOs, but we rely on their information also to do our job. And that's why I am saying IATI and every other agencies like ICVA should know this gap, that much as we are available and we really want to support, we want to work, we want to be seen, because also we want our work to be highlighted on your platform. We want the international community to know that a national actor is somewhere in the Sahel, in one community, doing something with their donors' funds for them to know that the money that they released at this time was actually spent maybe water construction, or supporting girl-child education, or supporting maternal issues, or supporting malaria, the cause of malaria, to reduce it in any community where we operate. But our news and our stories don't get to those platforms that the entire world will want to see. Take another example, FuseNet, one of the humanitarian hubs that reports news globally on humanitarian actions. And how many of the national actors' news gets to FuseNet on a year? I put this on the desk. You guys should go and check it. It's very rare that you find FuseNet reporting anything on national NGOs, but they report more on INGOs. They report more on the UN system with any UN agencies. So these are gaps, but even though we work together, and even where we co-implement projects, it is the intermediaries reports that goes to the platform. Ours don't go. It's been subdued. So I think conversation like this will open the space. It's a gap. I don't think if they are doing it deliberately, but I think it's a gap. And that is something that we need to let the donors know also, that the INGOs, the intermediaries, are not the only one in the humanitarian space. There are a lot of actors, whether they're small or big. We are doing the same, serving the same community of people who are affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Very, very, very clear, very eloquent. We have about 2 minutes left. Yemi, do you have any final word, final thoughts? And then I'm going to give a final word, final thought to Mark after.
No, thank you so much. I mean, let me just say to Peter and all the audiences present today that we hear you loud and clear. For us, it's very, very important what you're saying. And some of the things that we've been really adapting and trying to evolve towards too is really to improve traceability of resource flows and really enhance effectiveness for development or humanitarian action. That's something we value truly, and that's what we have been established to do. So thankfully, we are in the middle of designing our next 5-year strategic plan. And these are pertinent issues that we are really delving into deeply. And we are actually in the process of trying to make sense of all this information that's coming up. It's not something new, but it's something evolving with the current aid landscape changing tremendously, I must say. Several organizations are really facing existential threat at the moment. Several local NGOs, INGOs, including the United Nations, are feeling the heat at the moment. And at the same time, what is also very clear to all of us in a very clear manner that citizens across the globe are speaking that they want more transparency. They wanted to know where money begins and where it ended, to do what in what spaces. So people are calling upon effectiveness. They are asking for value for money, taxpayers' money to be used more efficiently and effectively. These are mutually non-exclusive objectives people are asking us to deliver on. So I think this challenge is going to transform us in a very good way. I would say that it will enhance our ability to make transparency across the entire full chain, from all the way from the source of money to where it ended up. And thankfully, Peter has raised a very important issue of visibility, allowing visibility of all actors, and then transparency in the flows, and then most importantly, impact, and also giving credit to where it is due, so that the recognition, the incentive starts changing. So we truly look forward to working with all development partners, those mandating downstream publishers as well, but more importantly, with you all actors in the ground to try and make these data not only be made available, but also be useful to your own needs in planning, forging partnerships, and coordination. I have seen very, very innovative practices, for example, from Accountability Lab, where they are trying to do matchmaking and mergers between various partners in this difficult moment to try and make effectiveness become the bold effort. So there is so much to do if we have the data, knowing who's operating where and how we can best make use of partnerships and cooperations and collaborations. So it's an exciting moment. There is an opportunity, but truly also a challenging moment. So I look forward to working with you. This is the beginning of a conversation of a larger nature. So I just wanted to acknowledge this, and I wanted to thank ICVA for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Yemi. I agree. Very important conversation, and the beginning. Well, the beginning of a new part of it. I'm sure it's been going on for a long time, but happy to engage more with it. Mark, over to you. Any last 1-minute thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks everyone for the great discussion, and for Peter for providing all of these kind of great examples and context, and the kind of call to action, I think, also at the country level, which is what we heard kind of consistently and repeatedly from, as Peter said, other colleagues across the world, from local and national actors. Lots of the points that were made by Peter were repeated by many other local and national actors as well. But Peter probably did it in a more forceful and eloquent way, I would say, as well. So yes, I think we're 15 years in from the first published data to IATI, and it took some time to get to this point, where we had good enough data to be published to IATI. And I think at that point, we're at that point now where the data is good enough that it can be started to be used for a whole range of different purposes. We have the FTS pilot, we have use at the country level, we have examples of it being used for accountability purposes as well. And so I think there's a real opportunity for other actors to go and look at this data and to see the extent to which now it can start to be useful for their own business processes as well. It's not a question of suggesting people to do a whole load of additional work. It's a question of saying, okay, how can maybe this data help you already on your existing work and maybe make your life easier as well. It's also becoming increasingly easy to publish, but we know that there are still obstacles there. And I think that's something that the Secretary is aware of, and there's a lot of work that's being done to kind of try to make some of those tools easier to use as well. But that's not only the question, I think, of the Secretariat. There's also other actors that can maybe think about, if you're donors who are mandating your organizations to publish, I think it's good to think about the consequences also for NGOs and for downstream partners, and how to make that a really sustainable process that's not just going to be a one-off checkbox kind of compliance exercise, but you're really integrating that publication as part of your work to kind of ensure that you're getting the best value for money, the most effectiveness from your resources as well. The final thing I want to say is that at the back of the report, there's 2.5 pages, so pages 18 to 20. There's 2.5 pages of recommendations. They're very concise and they're designed to be quite like short and straightforward, and they're directed at different groups. So you'll probably see in there kind of which stakeholder group you're from, and it would be great to take a look at those recommendations and see which of them, if you think that they're kind of sensible and they apply to you, which of them you think that as an organization or an individual you might be able to take forward some things in those areas as well. Because it would be great that all of the time that everyone gave very generously in having these interviews with us, that we would like to make sure that as much of these recommendations as possible can be implemented. But that's not a job only for one individual organization or secretariat. It's really a shared task, I think, because the task is large, and I think the opportunity also is huge. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone. Let me take this moment to really thank all our panelists. So Peter, Yemi, and also to thank Mark for the work on the report and the presentations. And to say, Mark, we continue to look forward to working with you even more so now on the pooled fund story and how we can link IATI to the various pooled funds, including NGO-led pooled funds, to start to have a real sense of where we are in pooled fund financing and how do we get to reach a target of 70% of pooled fund financing going to local and national actors. And yeah, we also look forward to helping provide clarity and simplicity in all of this. And Peter, very much along your lines, making sure that local and national NGOs have the capacity and the visibility and the power that goes along with information and with data, right? And how do we help make that happen, that your voices are there and what you see and how you're funded and where you work is also very much captured in all these sort of international data transparency efforts. So really, again, a warm thank you to all of you. Thank you, Ole, as well for jumping in on this conversation and for piloting the IATI FTS linkages, which are so important as well to keep, and we look forward to keep on hearing how that's going. Count ICVA as an ally in all of this, and really look forward. Hope for the audience this was useful for you. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us or to IATI or to Mark or also Peter if you're okay if you have further questions and further ideas. With that, and let me thank also Eileen and Jean-Marie on the ICVA side and Manon on the ICVA side for helping to really make all of this possible. And we look forward to seeing you again in our next launch events and webinars. Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.